one of the most joyous moments of the year. You track back a high-speed chase, really, down the flank with Anthony. You pursued him step for step all the way down to the Palace touchline and then unfurled a perfectly timed tackle.
Of course, everybody knows that he's a quick player, fast player, but I was like, no, I got him. Like, don't worry, everybody, like, I got him.
Joining me today, I've got a gent whom I admire greatly, a 22-year-old American who's already journeyed from the deep south of Alabama to deeper Bavaria and now deepest South London. True joy to welcome US men's national team and Crystal Palace centre-back, Bama Beckenbauer, all-round great human being, Mr. Chris Richards.
Hey, Roger, that was awesome. That was a cool introduction.
It's all true, and I want to start by going right back to the beginning because you are a native of Hoover, Alabama, and at the risk of stating the obvious, not one of the major hotbeds of soccer culture in America. Hardcore high school football territory, Friday Night Lights style.
Like you said, Friday Night Lights is what we were doing. Every Friday, like that was the thing to do, was to go to the high school football game and hang out with your friends.
You've talked about how you were pretty much the only African-American kid in Hoover who played soccer. And I'm fascinated, how self-conscious were you of that the whole time?
I don't know, it kind of gave me this sense of like independence growing up, where I didn't really necessarily need the people around me to, to kind of gas me up. Like, it was just, I had my own path that I knew I wanted to take.
I saw an incredible interview you did with Rio Ferdinand, where you said, as you've been kind of unpacking that, almost being a double outsider in America, and not until you got to Europe did you find people who looked like you, who kicked the ball that you love to kick.
I think being biracial, you kind of already have that identity crisis. Sometimes it feels like I'm a little bit too black for like my white friends and then a little too white for my black friends. And just on top of that, I was also playing soccer. So it was like, I was, like you said, like a double outsider.
How much exposure did you have to the professional game back then? Did you have idols that you looked at outside of your world?
Clint Dempsey maybe at Fulham or Landon Donovan at Everton.
And were you like, them? I want to be them. That is a fantasy land I want to jump into. Or were you like, that feels so far away. How do I even get through the enchanted forest to find my way to glory?
Yeah, it felt too far away for me, honestly. It almost felt like it was too big of a dream for me at that time because I'd never seen anybody around me do it, especially not at the caliber that we're at now with the Americans. It's like everybody's able to do it if we really put our mind to it.
Not everybody, not this guy, Chris, but you gave an interview once where you talked about the single moment that you decided you were going to go all in on football. You were in Buenos Aires, an under-16 regional ODP team. Yeah. They took you to a local club game. I think it was Lanús against Banfield.
Yeah.
It was the first professional game you'd ever attended, which blows my mind. Take us back there. The atmosphere, the experience, the passion.
No, like I said, at that point I'm 15, 16, and we're going to this game, and we're all wearing green tops because that was like the color of our region, and apparently that was the color of the away team as well. And so, we're driving up on the bus, and like they're throwing stuff at our bus, and we're getting off, and like, of course, you're 15, you're kind of like yourself, but also you're like, all right, this is also sick, They're throwing flares, they're throwing like hot dogs, coffees. It's just like whatever they get their hands on, they're throwing it at us. I come home, I tell my parents, it's like, this is something I've never experienced before, but like I want to experience for the rest of my life.
They threw crap at us. I want that.
Yeah.
That.
It was scary, but also was very inspiring at the same time.
It was around that time that you just started to play centre-back. At that age, most kids want to sit up front, score the goals, grab the glory. And I'm fascinated, what drew you to that position? Because Arsene Wenger once told me, people who love to win become strikers. People who hate losing defenders.
I like that. I like that quote. I don't necessarily need to score the goals, but I can help prevent them. Like you said, I hate to lose. I don't know if it's just because of how I grew up, but I'm very competitive.
There weren't a lot of places to develop at an elite level. So you had to go on trial to FC Dallas, 650 miles away from home.
Yeah, I came from Alabama where we weren't even the best team in Alabama. And then I went on trial to FC Dallas and I was like, this is a whole different world.
Yeah, the trial didn't last long. Inside 5 days, you were cut. That kind of rejection, 16 years old, away from home, just starting out. And you ended up moving to Texas anyway a few months later, not to FC Dallas, but to Texans SC. You suffered crippling homesickness away from your family, but that perseverance paid off because a year after they'd first rejected you, Dallas reapproached you, and things, I've got to say, started to move extremely quickly once you got back to Dallas. Within a year, you'd signed your first professional contract as a homegrown player. Your mum has a story about you. 10 years of age, you'd put sticky notes on the mirror in your bedroom with all your goals, all of them culminating in the ultimate dream of playing in MLS. And when you signed that first contract with Dallas, 18 years old, having achieved the extent of what you'd allowed yourself to dream as a kid, were you like, I have climbed the mountain? Or were you like, whoa, I've got to come up with some new goals and buy some new sticky notes?
I had to buy new sticky notes. I had these goals set out for me, and it was like, okay, once I signed my first deal at Dallas, I was like, what's next?
Within a month, before you'd even played a professional game in MLS, you were given a trial at Bayern Munich. How much of a shock was it? Because that is a world away.
To go from Birmingham to Bayern within 2 years was like unheard of. I was shocked, and especially when they offered me the year-long loan. I had graduated high school the week before. I had one suitcase to pack for a year and moved to a place where I didn't speak the language, and I couldn't even tell my parents or friends goodbye because I was like, I'll be back in a year, no biggie. And then I wasn't back in a year. I'm still here.
Can't go to senior week. Got to play for Bayern Munich. Were there aspects of German culture off the field that you found difficult to adjust to?
Yeah, definitely. Me and my coach, Sebastian Hunnes, as soon as I got there, we were butting heads because, he wanted it one way. I was like, oh, there's a different way to do it. And that was just, I was getting punished for it, and very much something that I wasn't ready for when I first moved there. I remember my first day I walk in and, right beside the opening of the locker room, it's, David Alaba and Ayn Robin, Frank Ribery, and they're just, they're laughing like they're humans, but then I walk past them and they have this cold stare on their face, and I was like, oh, okay. All right, nice to meet you.
You got a great story of your first time training with the Bayern senior team, and you get yelled at by Ayn Robin. And even as you were being yelled at in real time inside your own head, you're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I'm being yelled at by Ayn Robin.
Yeah, it was very intimidating, but also I was like, oh, not many people can say that,
He's actually such a sweet bloke. Part of me was dying to know what you did to bring out that side of Bayern. But Bayern signed you on a permanent contract 6 months later. You, Chris, were grinding it out. First with the under-19s, then with the reserve team. Were there ever times in your heart in those first 2 years when you started to doubt the pathway you'd walked at Bayern?
Yeah, of course. I think, especially as a young player, the first thing you want to do is play. You see guys who are your age making their first team debut, whether it's at Bayern or it's around the league, and you're like, why am I not doing that yet? It was one of those things where I was like, man, did I make the wrong choice? Am I going to be one of those players who's on loan every year? And I figured, eventually the moments will come, and they did.
You finally earned your Bundesliga debut with Bayern at the end of the 2019-20 season. That was the first summer of the pandemic. It was all fanless. Came on in the 84th minute. And another debut quickly followed. November, you made your first appearance for the US men's national team. A 10-minute cameo in a friendly against Panama. Again, without fans, without your family able to come. But you said to me after the match, it didn't matter to me that we had nobody in the terraces or that I only played 10 minutes. It was just being able to kind of cross that off my list of things I want to do in football. Where does that attitude come from that you bring to push all of that aside and say, this achievement was everything I needed it to be?
Whether it was 4 minutes, 10 minutes, or 90, it was something that I dreamed of as since I was a little kid. And I'm not going to let somebody take away, that moment from me.
In July 2022, you decided to move to Crystal Palace. Blockbuster signing, $13 million, Premier League football. What did the incredible Patrick Vieira say to you, Chris, that made you decide this is going to be the place for me?
Palace is Palace. It's the Premier League, South London. It's just, you can just tell from television that the guys enjoy each other, and it's a quality team. So that's all it took for me.
It is, listeners, if you have not been, one of the greatest places to watch and play football in England, home to such an incredibly diverse population, a truth that's reflected really in the diversity of the Palace squad. And I loved hearing you talk about just how much that means to you, Chris.
We could literally put out 18 of black kids out here, and it's something that growing up I never would have thought was even possible. We represent every corner of London, and we don't put up this facade where we're this posh team. We want to be the people's team, and I think we very much represent that.
August 15th, you made your debut. You came on as a substitute against Liverpool. How much of a step up playing wise is the Premier League? Can you describe it to someone, me, who's not played a single minute.
It was just so fast. I almost didn't believe it. But I think very much in my head, I made it a bit faster than it was because I was just, nervous, anxiety, adrenaline, everything was going at that point. But it was, it's probably my favorite moment of football so far in my career.
There's a saying that the beginnings are always difficult. And that was the case for you at Crystal Palace. The frustration of a long-term hamstring injury that you suffered in September kept you out for 2 months.
I felt like when I came here, I was in good shape and ready to prove myself. And then right before the World Cup, of course, I had a bad injury. And it was like a double whammy because A, I couldn't prove myself to Palace. And then B, also I was missing the World Cup, where being by myself when everyone's gone for the World Cup break, it was tough. But I think it just made me work even harder for when my chance finally came to finally be able to put my best foot forward.
You broke the news yourself back in November on Instagram. I believe the word you used was gutted to miss the tournament that you dreamt of playing in since you were a kid.
Yeah. For me, it wasn't just me representing myself. Of course, it was representing my country, but it was also representing my family, like all the people that had been there with me on the journey. And my first experience with the World Cup was 2010, like the US-Algeria game. I was at a soccer camp back home in Birmingham. We were outside and like the game was being played on the radio and the loudspeakers, and I was 10 years old at that point, and like that was like my very first like go USA when that happened. We went crazy, and I think what hurt the most was that my brother's also 10 years old, and I was like, oh, like this would be my chance for him to kind of have that same inspiration that I had when I was his age. I'd probably say it push-started my career or my love for the game. And for me to miss that, it felt like I was letting him down more than myself.
To have to watch on from home as your friends, your teammates took the field, how difficult was that?
I couldn't watch the first game. Like, I really couldn't. Like, of course, I wanted to support everybody, but it was one of those things where I was like, I can't, because it hurt, And my mom and dad came. They were downstairs watching it, and I was like, I can't, I have to be up in my room. I can't sit there with you guys. I'm sorry. Then for the US-England game, it was a bit easier because I knew that if we had lost, that I would get a bunch of crap at training the next day or whenever everybody came back. So I was like, I'll be able to watch this with a bit of a lighter heart. And so we actually went to a pub when we met up with some American outlaws, and it was good. It was good to be around those guys.
You made your first ever Premier League start January the 18th against Manchester United, a belated start to your dreams. Were you nervous ahead of the game? Did you get nervous, Chris?
If people say they don't get nervous, I think they're lying, because I very much was nervous.
I enjoyed that game so bloody much. You made your impact early and often. 42nd minute, one of the most joyous moments of the year. You tracked back, a high-speed chase really, down the flank with Anthony. You pursued him step for step all the way down to the Palace touchline, and then unfurled a perfectly timed tackle, just snuffing out all danger. Tell us what went through your mind, because got to be honest, I was exhausted just watching.
Yeah, so the gaffer was yelling at me the whole time. He was like, foul him, foul him. I was like, I know I can get him. I don't want to foul him yet. Of course, everybody knows that he's a quick player, fast player, but I was like, no, I got him.
In game, are you aware of what you just done? Are you in your head? You're like, oh my God, Chris Richards from Hoover, Alabama, I belong in the Premier League.
It very much hit me after the game, but I think in that moment, I was like, all right, like, this is what I'm here for. I've just got to keep it going. And I feel like I proved it to myself in that moment that I was supposed to be here.
Do you get back to the locker room and just your phone has all of your mates just sending that clip to you after the game?
Yeah, everybody. I mean, I remember like all the texts and calls and tweets and Instagram. Like it went crazy. And I don't know, it was weird to me because I felt like, it was just something that I was supposed to do. It wasn't something that was extra special. It was something that I expected of myself. So I didn't feel like it was something crazy.
Would I be hyperbolic to say, Chris, that this was one of the greatest Premier League moments in Alabama history?
I would like to think so.
I also know there's a London WhatsApp group for all the American Premier League players. Are you all supporting each other?
Yeah, definitely. It's a brotherhood, and we really lean on each other for support.
You went up to Leeds Fulham to see just like the most American game of all time. You wanted a piece of that.
Exactly. No, it was awesome. We're still the same guys who go to camp with each other. Like we all just kick it after the game and just have a laugh.
Which one of you is most likely to develop the Brad Friedel Mockney London accent while you're over there?
I would say Wes, because that sounds like something that he would do.
Money on the fact that Wes is just going to stroll into the American camp and be like, hey, up lads,
100%. That's Wes. That's something that he would do.
You're still just 22 years old, but I do want to know, If you were to go back in time and look at your 16-year-old self in the eyes, what would you say?
I'd probably say dream bigger. Like I said, my whole life, I never even thought this was tangible. My parents always told me, growing up, if people aren't laughing at your dreams or your goals, then you haven't dreamt big enough.
What's on the sticky note now, Chris?
The first one's stay healthy. The second one is just give 100% in everything I do. At the end of the day, to be okay with what I did because I gave everything I could.
Chris Richards, to you, to your family, to your brother in particular, and to the mighty, mighty Crystal Palace. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Courage. Listen to the full version of this podcast and all our podcasts wherever you get your pods. But first, subscribe here for more Men in Blazers videos. And courage.